What's up? Welcome in to the latest episode of Pod Like a Champion, the blueandgold.com recruiting podcast. Thanks for joining us in this live edition of the show. For those of you guys watching on YouTube, I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by our recruiting insider at blueandgold.com, Mike Singer. It's Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. Mike, how you doing, man? I mean, you've been flying all over and scooting all over the place to these Under Armour camps.
Yeah,
Almost like it's, recruiting grind is back, right?
I know. It's good. It's good to be back. And out on the road past couple weeks. Dallas Under Armour camp, saw some big Notre Dame targets, and then just a couple days ago, Atlanta Under Armour camp, my neck of the woods here. So it was a really nice couple days, and should have some more trips coming up soon. So maybe even another one here in Atlanta, to see some underclassmen recruits again, and just going to be on the road. Definitely want to see Notre Dame's quarterback commit. Steve Angeli, the 2022 class, a good bet. Just get out on the road, safely and as much as possible here.
Yeah, and even I'll dip into a little bit, head
That's
out this
right.
Friday to Evanston Township High School in my own backyard, or I should say my folks' backyard. Watch Sebastian Cheeks, the four-star linebacker target. Get to see him in person once again. This time in game action. It feels normal. We got all these recruiting things. We got the NCAA tournament back. Progress, man. If it feels like it.
Yeah,
Before we dive into,
yeah,
go
it's gonna
ahead.
be awesome. Yeah, especially seeing um, Sebastian Cheeks play. Class of 2022 four-star linebacker, target for Notre Dame, big target for the Irish. I'm really looking forward to seeing your report. So make sure folks check that out at blueandgold.com this weekend.
So before we dive into a few topics here, of course, for those of you guys on with us live now, we'll take your questions a little bit later on. Want to make sure you guys are subscribed to our YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Just takes one click. We'll love you forever. Hit the notification bell right there. You can get notified every time we put out a new video, and hit that thumbs up button on this video. Helps our stuff reach more people. We really appreciate that. And of course, if you are listening on our podcast platform, make sure you are subscribed to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you'd be so kind, please leave us a rating, leave us a review. We'll also love you forever. And of course, if you want to ask us questions later on, best way to make sure we answer your question is to drop us a super chat. Yes, we are easily bought. You can do that right here, as Mike has up on the screen right there. But first,
And if there's a super chat,
oh yeah, I mean,
we get to hear
that's
that.
that's the best part of it.
Of course.
I mean, who loses? Who says no? Just to get that thing on there.
That's right.
But first, why don't we dive into running back recruiting? That kind of feels like one thing brewing a little bit here in light of a recent visitor to campus, and of course, that's four-star running back Dallin Hayden out of Memphis, Tennessee. Mike, I know you spoke to him after the visit. And not only that, but with the dead period seemingly coming to an end, it has been recommended by the oversight committee to end it when it expires on May 31st. We're starting to see some visits trickle in, running back being a spot where already a couple of guys, including Hayden, have set official visits. So, Mike, I'll give you the floor here just to kind of set the stage on what's next and where you see that position going for Notre Dame grabbing a second back in the class to join Jadarian Price, who's already committed.
Yeah, so we'll kind of go one by one with three targets. There's a lot more than three on the board right now, but for those who follow Notre Dame recruiting just a little bit, maybe just some shows here and there. There's blueandgold.com, of course, the recruiting coverage there, my Twitter account or whatever it is. There's three guys really that are like the biggest. Like if you're only going to know three running back targets for Notre Dame in this 2022 class, it's these three. So Dallin Hayden visited Notre Dame's campus. What was it, last Thursday? On his Twitter page, he tweeted out a picture of him, in front of Touchdown Jesus. For those wondering and watching on YouTube, I get questions: is this a virtual background? This is a fathead. Like this is no virtual background. Like this is a real thing that in my in guest room slash office, and people stay in my house, and they get to see Touchdown Jesus. Some love it and some don't, but it's here to stay. So back to your regularly scheduled programming. Um, so yeah, Dallin Hayden visited Notre Dame, and again, for YouTube audience, that picture of Dallin Hayden there was actually from his Ohio State visit the day before, and that's actually an Ezekiel Elliott jersey, the full picture, if you're able to see that. So it really does feel like a Notre Dame Ohio State battle. Tennessee is certainly in the mix. His father Aaron played for the Vols, so you can't count them out. Illinois also in the mix. Brett Bielema is the head coach there, and he was previously the head coach at Arkansas, where Dallin Hayden's brother Chase signed and played for Arkansas, then transferred to Illinois. So he's certainly looking at Illinois, and they're a school to keep an eye on. But again, I do feel like it's Notre Dame and Ohio State. Great relationship Dallin Hayden has with Lance Taylor, the Irish running back coach. Also has as a strong connection with Tony Alford, the Ohio State running backs coach. I think this is a big time player. This is someone who, as a sophomore, a lot of schools were recruiting him as an athlete, kind of we saw you as a running back on your sophomore tape, but you also look really good as a defensive back. So he had some athlete offers. He had some strictly defensive back offers. Notre Dame offered him last summer, though, strictly as a running back. And it certainly paid off that Notre Dame was in on him early at running back, because now everyone's recruiting as running back. Dallin Hayden had a phenomenal junior season this past fall, and just really a big-time player. It's close to call right now for me, like too close to call where he's going to end up, whether it's the Buckeyes or the Fighting Irish. He does have a couple, and we're going to call these tentative official visits. Nothing is set in stone and locked in right now. I got to pull this up on my phone actually, but his Notre Dame tentative visit, and I'm double checking, is June 11th that weekend, and I believe Ohio State will be the following week. So again, it's tentative. We're gonna dish on here in a little bit our thoughts on June visits and what that may look like. There's been a ton of optimism that June visits will open up, but it's no guarantee. And so I want to mention it. They're tentative official visits that are being set. So that's Dallin Hayden, Notre Dame, Ohio State battle. It seems like. So the next running back target for Notre Dame that I would want to talk about here is Nicholas Singleton. He was actually Notre Dame's first running back offer in the 2022 class. This would have been back in November of 2019. He visited for a game, and then I think it was a week or two later, Notre Dame decided to invite him back. So he drove out from Pennsylvania to Notre Dame, even though he had just been there a week or two prior, and then got his offer from Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly in his office before, I want to say, was the November 23rd game of 2019. I believe that was Boston College or Navy, one of those two. And Notre Dame's been consistently a big factor in this recruitment. Probably for the past year or so, this one has felt like Ohio State, Penn State, and Notre Dame, in no specific order there. Right now, I think he might be leaning a little bit Notre Dame, but it's too close to call right now with Singleton, just like it is with Hayden. And I honestly, I've been joking that Tony Alford and Lance Taylor need to like call each other and be like, hey, let's flip a coin. One of us gets Singleton and the other one gets Hayden. In Ohio State's running back board has the same cast of characters pretty much as Notre Dame's. Like they've offered a lot of the same guys. Like you look at the top 5 guys on each board, at least how us media folk would interpret it. It's like the same guys. Nicholas Singleton, Dallin Hayden, Gavin Sawchuk, who we'll touch on. Damari Alston's a big running back target for both schools. There's another that I'm forgetting off the top of my head here. If Jabran Payne Like that's an Ohio guy. Notre Dame's off after him. If Ohio State offered Jabran Payne, you would have to like the Buckeyes in that recruitment too. And you know, I think they're probably talking to Payne a little bit. But back to Singleton, he is an explosive player, and when you see him on tape, you know you're like, wow, this young man could be a difference maker. And really, all three of these guys we're about to watch, or Sawchuk and Hayden before, impressive players. Singleton really has it all, and some folks I speak to think that he might be one of the best 2 or 3 backs in the entire country. Rivals has him listed as the number 9 running back in the country, um, and of course that doesn't include all-purpose backs. You throw all-purpose backs in there, and then you know you're clogging it up even more. But you know, some of my sources feel like Singleton is the best, or I should say, one of the best running backs in the country. One guy I know, a parent of a recruit in the 2021 class, a 5-star player. His dad told me that Singleton's the best running back he's ever seen come out of Pennsylvania, and this particular parent played in the NFL, and knows a thing or two about Pennsylvania high school football. So Nicholas Singleton, an impressive player, and he took a nice jump from sophomore to junior season. So just like with Hayden, if Notre Dame were to get really Singleton, Hayden, Sawchuk, Notre Dame would be in really good position. Yeah, and then let's talk a little bit about Gavin Sawchuk. I think the chances of Notre Dame landing him are a little bit slimmer. Comment from Rick here says Emeka Megwa was offered by both as well, and that is correct. Actually posted in Lucky Charms, which you can find at blueandgold.com on Monday night, that Megwa is, after eliminating Notre Dame early in his recruitment, Irish are back in the mix there, interestingly enough. So yes, thank you, Rick. That was the name I was looking for. But yeah, back to Gavin Sawchuk. Future cast picks are in for him to go to Oklahoma. I do think the Sooners are the leader there. Don't count out Notre Dame, though. I know the likes of Alabama, Florida, and Michigan are all after Gavin Sawchuk as well. But I keep hearing good things about where Notre Dame's at. And he's someone who I believe will take a longer trajectory in his recruitment. Like, he's going to play the longer game, whereas I feel like Hayden and Singleton would probably pop by August. Like, they're going to want to take their June visits and then commit in July before fall camp of their senior season. You know, Sawchuk, I feel like, is a guy who's going to stretch his recruitment out a little bit longer, which could be good for Notre Dame. Like, you know, figure out where you're at with Singleton and Hayden. You don't get those guys, and then you're really able to put in that full court press with Sawchuk. And so you lose out on those two guys potentially. You can still land, you know, a top 50 player nationally in Gavin Sawchuk. He plays for the same high school as Christian McCaffrey. Of course, one of Lance Taylor's biggest recruiting pitches is, hey, I coached Christian McCaffrey not only at Stanford, but I was on the Carolina Panthers staff with him as well. And Christian McCaffrey's probably the best running back in the NFL when he's healthy, and I know he's paid like that as well. Gavin Sawchuk is a guy who is all-purpose, you know, just like a Christian McCaffrey is, and fits the mold of what you would see with like a Chris Tyree, Kyron Williams. Like, you know, he's a difference maker. And Notre Dame would absolutely love to have him in the fold. And he was an early offer for Notre Dame as well. I believe he was the second or third running back offer for the Fighting Irish. So there is 6-7 minutes of me just dishing on those three running backs. I just want to add, you know, Damari Alston, Jabran Payne. I posted on Lucky Charms on Tuesday night, which had some big recruiting nuggets in there. So if you're not a subscriber at blueandgold.com, we'll give you a little hint. Use promo code Irish60. You get 2 months free of premium access. I posted another name, a young man from Alabama who Notre Dame, I think, will offer. So, you know, there's no all eggs in one basket. And I'm going to throw up the little bunny ears on that, like with Will Shipley last year. Like, no, you know, even though that's a myth in my humble opinion, there's certainly none of that going on. Like going really hard on one guy. Like Notre Dame is going hard on Sawchuk, Singleton, Hayden, Alston, even Jabran Payne. A lot of these guys. Lance Taylor casting a wide net.
I wonder how many times in a row now we've mentioned the name Will Shipley on this podcast.
It's a lot. It's just one of those things that it'll die when it dies, and it's probably not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, that thing is still alive. That recruitment, as in,
He
yeah,
committed
not going
to
anywhere. But
he committed to Clemson May 5th of 2020, and here we are. 11 months later, we're still talking about it.
the recruitment that never dies, just keeps living on. But so you had alluded to, Mike, that Sawchuk playing a longer game, Singleton and Hayden. All right, maybe summertime recruiting or commitment timelines, I should say. But as far as Notre Dame is concerned, who do you think is next or could be next? I know you've put some recent future cast in here for some guys to Notre Dame. I don't know if we've talked about them in a previous show or not, but if we have, tell people what they want here as far as who you think might be next or seems like a potential candidate to pop next for Notre Dame.
Yeah, there's a few. I wanted to touch on it because I forgot to mention with Nicholas Singleton. He has a few official visits lined up. I wanted to touch on. I did mention Hayden has his tentative official visit date set. Don't know if or when Sawchuk is coming to Notre Dame in June, but I do believe that if visits happen, that Notre Dame will do its absolute hardest or do its absolute best to get him on campus. Singleton will take officials to Wisconsin, Penn State, Northwestern, Notre Dame, and Ohio State in June. It's a busy month of June. It's going to be very interesting to see. And again, we'll touch on this here in a little bit, what official visits look like if they're able to happen in June. Notre Dame would get it June 18th. So you would have Hayden June 11th, Singleton June 18th. My guess would be, maybe Sawchuk on maybe the 25th.
So I think there, before we move on to the who's next to commit, I believe there's an early 2023 running back named to know here that you want to tell the people about. So go for it.
Yeah. So, Lance Taylor has been busting his tail here. He's involved with these top-rated running backs in the 2022 class, but there's an elite 2023 running back who he's after as well, and that's Justice Haynes from my neck of the woods, Roswell, Georgia, Blessed Trinity. Very strong profile fit for Notre Dame. I believe they have someone on the team from Blessed Trinity. Is that JD Bertrand? Could we get the crack staff on that?
Crack staff is on it, I am told.
JD Bertrand.
JD Bertrand sounds like the right answer. Yes. The crack staff
sophomore
has
linebacker.
confirmed.
Yeah, so just want to throw that out there. And his father, Vernon Haynes, played for the Georgia Bulldogs. So, when you have an in-state running back, his father played for Georgia, it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to beat that. And also, quite honestly, Irish did offer a little bit late compared to other schools. It's crazy to say this kid's a sophomore in high school. Notre Dame offered late. But when you compare it to other schools, Notre Dame was a little bit later to the game. I don't really want to get into that whole debate. Well, was it the academics thing and all that? But, Notre Dame having to check the academic, that's a different discussion for a different day. I'm not going to defend or criticize Notre Dame for the timing of, sophomores and offering sophomores in high school. But from what I'm told, Lance Taylor, and he's offered several 2023 running backs already. There's a Florida State commit, Cedric Baxter. Cedric Irvin Jr. is another guy we could definitely touch on. But Justice Haynes, really good like Notre Dame fit. So if we're looking ahead past 2022, he is someone to keep an eye on. and I can't believe we haven't even mentioned we spent 15 minutes here on running back recruiting. Of course, the Irish have a commitment from Jadarian Price in the 2022 class. He is locked in, solid with Notre Dame. A Rivals 250 running back, had offers from Ohio State and Stanford and a bunch of other schools. And I'll have a detailed interview with him on Saturday. And it's going to be a really neat story. Jadarian Price is a young man that Notre Dame fans are going to love once they get to know him more.
All right, so there you go. Your running back lowdown, whole picture painted out there, 22 and 23 classes. But back to 2022. Now, Mike, who do you think are some candidates that could be Notre Dame's next commit?
Yeah. there's several. I mean, I'm gonna only go with three, but there's several that I think, and I've said this in past videos and podcasts here and whatnot. I think they could be. I mean, they're at what, 11 commitments right now. I honestly think they might be at like 18 to 20 by the time June rolls around. And you remember covering that 2020 recruiting class for Notre Dame. They basically had the entire class wrapped up by July 5th. They landed Xavier Watts and Caleb Offord, and then the last guy in the class was Ramon Henderson, and they landed him. I believe he waited to announce on National Signing Day that cycle, but it was pretty much known all along that he was going to end up at Notre Dame. This is a much different recruiting cycle than 2020, so when visits do up and up, are there like guys from different schools that are committed there? Like, do they now want to come look at Notre Dame? Are there Notre Dame commits that want to look elsewhere? Like, there's a lot to kind of figure out there. But I do feel like Notre Dame is going to have a big class going into potential official visit season. And these three, I feel like, could pop to Notre Dame before then. Jalen Sneed has been pretty adamant that he wants to wait until the summer. But I've covered Notre Dame recruiting long enough, and it's just been 2 years, that sometimes when you'll cover recruitment and the kid's like, I really want to wait this thing out. Like, I don't want to commit now. I want to take all my visits. But then, like, a young man visits Notre Dame, and they're just like that perfect fit, and that kid's like, why would I want to go anywhere else? I feel like that might be Jalen Sneed. This is just my opinion from being dialed in this recruitment, that I think he might be someone who doesn't wait until June, or maybe if he waits until June, there's already like a wink that, I'm coming. Maybe I just, his mom hasn't been on campus yet. So maybe it's like hey, I'm coming, but my mom, I don't want to announce anything until my mom commits. This is just conjecture, speculation, guys. Like, I'm not saying like that's the case. I don't know. But I do really feel like Notre Dame's the leader here. I put in a future cast pick for Jalen Sneed to land at Notre Dame. I just think Marcus Freeman's done an incredible job here. If he does, stretch things into June and takes all of his official visits, Oklahoma, you would keep an eye on. Oregon, Texas A&M. I think he's talked a little bit about Nebraska. But for me, people have even said, like, what if Clemson offers? What about South Carolina? For me, I don't think he's going to stay in state. I think he wants to get away from home. And from what I know about Jalen Sneed, academics is really big to him. I can't say I'm an expert on Oklahoma and Oregon's academics, but I just can't imagine they stack up to Notre Dame. So I do think that Notre Dame is probably the leader here for Jalen Sneed. And again, he did visit on Sunday, self-guided tour with his high school head coach, BJ Payne, who I've wrote a good bit about, has a close relationship with Notre Dame defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman. They've known each other for 15 or 20 years, and they're both from the same area in Northeast Ohio, and have just kept in touch over the years. And I just think there's a lot working here for Notre Dame to land Jalen Sneed, the number 63 player in the country. And if he does commit to Notre Dame, man, this linebacker class would be damn good. He would join Nolan Ziegler, 4-star linebacker from Michigan, Joshua Burnham, Rivals 250 guy, another one from Michigan, just committed. Was that just last week or the week before? We sent Patrick to that that commitment ceremony. And then, there's still Sebastian Cheeks we talked about. There's still Junior Tui Halamaka, Devin Jackson, Robbie Snell. Notre Dame's going to have quite a good problem on their hands with, like, hey, sorry, we don't have room for you because, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but they are really looking good with several linebacker recruits right now. A couple other guys I'll touch on. Holden Stays, FutureCast pick-in for him to land at Notre Dame. Also, Eli Raridan, I have a FutureCast pick for him to land at Notre Dame. Stays, 4-star linebacker from Atlanta, Westminster. Incredible profile fit for Notre Dame. Westminster's the top private school in Georgia. Eli Raridan, a double legacy, as I like to call him. His father, Scott Raridan Jr., played at Notre Dame in the early 2000s. Eli was born, while his father was still playing at Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken. And then Eli's grandfather, Scott Raridan Sr., was on Lou Holtz's staff as I believe he was assistant strength and conditioning coach. So I've got FutureCast picks in for both of these guys to land at Notre Dame. Both very talented tight end prospects. More of receiving tight ends than like a Brock Wright blocking guy. But when you see these guys on tape, they're more than willing blockers as well. So I like what I see there. And for those asking, look, Notre Dame's already got a tight end commit from Jack Nickel. So, Mike, are you projecting Notre Dame to take 3 tight ends? I honestly don't know. I have a lot of questions right now about what Notre Dame's going to do with its tight end recruiting in the 2022 class. Is it a first man in situation? Do they take 3? There are plenty of questions here. We'll get answers at some point. But all I've got to say is I feel really good about where Notre Dame stands with Holden Stays. He's done he's connected very well with John McNulty and Tommy Reese, and Raridan has as well. I know Notre Dame quarterback commit Steve Angeli has done a great job connecting with both of these young men as well. So certainly something to keep an eye on there.
Yeah, I keep thinking with tight ends here that, you and I have a lot of questions, and I feel like Notre Dame fully hasn't answered them themselves yet, which, not that it has to or anything, but just one of those things where you look at it and it's like, they're just going to figure it out somehow. And we'll see. I don't think they know. And well, we certainly don't either, but interesting nonetheless.
Yeah. It's like one of those things, Patrick, like, fans really much get concerned about scholarship numbers, whether it's like how many can we take in this recruiting class, or, oh my gosh, we have 91 scholarship guys. How are we going to get down to 85? They're just, Patrick, you look like you're just holding off a yawn. Is that right? Were you just holding off a yawn?
I did attempt to stifle one, yes.
You did a good job.
Not that I find tight end boring at all. This is one of the most fascinating things in the class. Anyway, I thought I was pretty subtle there.
I can tell. I guess we've been doing enough of these shows that I can tell when you're yawning.
Spend any amount of time, yakking, and for the people is gonna, let us pick up on each other's mannerisms here. Very, very astute. Good work.
That's awesome. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah, scholarship. It's like, all right,
scholarships.
We have 91 scholarship numbers. How are we going to get down to 85? Like these things, they just work themselves out. One of those things that talk about it with linebacker recruiting just a minute ago. These are good problems to have. Notre Dame is not like, oh man, like we need a 5th DB. Like let's go get so and so. Like, you'd rather have to turn guys away, rather than, we're not in a great spot on this board. We really need to extend it. Not if they, like Notre Dame might offer another running back, who I mentioned earlier. Like that's not a bad thing. Like Notre Dame's not like striking out on guys. But when you're going down to plan C, D, or whatever it is, sometimes those guys pan out and are really good players. Sometimes they don't. You would like to see Notre Dame get their top of the board guys, and Notre Dame again at multiple positions on both sides of the ball. Notre Dame might have to turn down very talented players. How many Notre Dames they will take in this class, really early to project. It'll be somewhere in the 20s, I would imagine, if that gives you guys a good idea. But we haven't had spring ball yet. You would get a better idea even in fall camp. So it's just really early to tell like where Notre Dame feels like it needs to add players at a certain position or transfers or what have you.
Wow. So we just got a super chat. Uh, Nick, I just had to say, well, okay. First, shouts to you, Nick. There we go. If I yawn one more time, the glorious tight ends Notre Dame is hoarding. I swear. Well, anyone who's followed us for a while should know I love writing about tight ends and Notre Dame tight end usage. I feel like every other week I was churning out numbers about 12 and 13 personnel, but thanks, Nick. Appreciate the
Yeah,
shout.
we have some comments on YouTube about. Let me see if I can find it here. Why so many tight ends take one and load up at speed at receiver. I mean, look, you got to get the best players on the field. Notre Dame loves its tight ends. It can recruit tight ends very well. Eli Raridan and Holden Staes are both really good receivers. Like, you put those guys in the slot, they're match nightmares. Raridan is so long, and it's got some explosion to him. And Tommy Tremble, Holden Staes, who looks like Tommy Tremble, is just scratching the surface with how good he can be. So I don't know. Do you want speed at receiver? Sure. But I want guys who are matchup nightmares, whether that be a 5'10" slot receiver, a 6'4" outside receiver, a 6'6" tight end. Give me guys who can create separation. There's track speed and there's football speed. Some guys can run a 4.3 on the track, but when push comes to shove on the football field, they don't look as fast. They can be locked down. So not trying to diminish speed as a factor, but don't sleep on Notre Dame's usage of tight ends. As far as the 3 tight end thing, is it possible? Sure. It certainly is. Jack Nichols, a really talented player, picked Notre Dame over LSU, Oregon, Penn State, Iowa, a bunch of schools. He's nothing to scoff at. Raridan, a very nice player, a legacy. Solid offer list as well. Auburn, Iowa, a bunch of other schools. Stays, Penn State decommit. Offers from Alabama, Texas, LSU, everybody. So, I mean, these are really good players. And like I mentioned earlier, Patrick, there's a numbers problem here for Notre Dame, and it's a good problem to have. I'm sure Notre Dame wishes it could take 45 guys in this class and have unlimited scholarship numbers, but unfortunately, that's not a real thing.
I wonder if it wishes it could take 45 tight ends. Something tells me yes. All right, let's move on. Mike, you touched on that a couple of guys, running backs, have confirmed visits, or at least as confirmed as you possibly can, with nothing set in stone yet as far as, yes, they are 100% going to open visits. But I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are of what that's going to look like, assuming they stick with the recommendation from the Football Oversight Committee and open up the end the dead period in June. I mean, I know we kind of thought that this might be a thing that would happen in December and January, and you get this end of 2021 cycle Wild West. But now there's still, let's say you open them up on June 1st, it's almost 6 months until signing day. What do you think this thing looks like?
One thing I think, if recruiting opens up in June, one thing, it's not going to be like, from 0 to 100. Like, you can't have guys on May 31st and then June 1st, there's like, 30 kids on campus. I think there's going to be something like a limit to amount of kids you can have at one time. And then if you do have a recruit on campus, he's only allowed to be in contact with, X amount of coaches at one time, in that these recruits can't be together. Like, they're going to have to do whatever they can to limit cases of COVID with the recruits. I think that's probably the biggest problem, is if a prospective student athlete goes on a recruiting visit and gets COVID and gets sick, then what? who's liable for that? Like those are kind of the things that are going through my head with that whole situation. So I think there will be, some things like that to keep an eye on. So there's not going to be massive recruiting weekends for official visits with 10 guys. I think it'll be limited. That's my personal opinion. The other thing here is July. It will be interesting. Do visits happen in July? You haven't there's been schools like West Virginia, Notre Dame here a little bit, but there's been a lot of schools that have sent out graphics to these recruits, like scheduling their visits. So a lot of schools are doing this, but I haven't seen any recruits schedule a July visit because I think that's going to go back to being a dead period. There's going to be June, which is going to be crazy busy, and I think July is going to go back to being a dead period because it'll go back to the normal recruiting schedule. July is is normally a dead period, and I think the coaches want to prepare for fall camp. Maybe have a little downtime. A good month for vacation usually for coaches. A little bit of a calm before the storm of fall camp and the football season. So I think April, May is going to continue to be self-guided tour stuff. June, you're going to have official visits in some capacity. And then July, I think, is going to go back to being a dead period. And I think August is even a dead period. It used to not be. You'd have recruits going to fall camp practices. But I want to say August is typically a dead period. So then maybe your next time you have recruits on campus after June is, I feel like, by September. All schools are going to have game day visitors. And hopefully that can happen safely.
I think I agree with a lot of that. And I would imagine, and I think it makes sense that it would only be June, just so you're not, rolling out 3 months worth of visits and then you get 2 weeks in and all of a sudden you've hit a couple of snags with kids getting sick or parents getting sick or what have you. And I think in that way, it's just a soft rollout, I guess. And also considering, like I had mentioned, there's still 6 months until signing day. I don't think you need to say, oh, it's June. You've got to get all these official visits in 2 months just because a bunch of kids want to come on them now. Like you'll still have visits available in September, October, November, December, in theory. And I don't think you'll see players not wanting to take them then either. Like there's always guys who one extend the recruitment out longer and just end up taking in-season visits anyway. And then two, the December stretch where in a normal year you get guys who are committed or elsewhere or whatnot that decide they want to take some visits. I think those will all still be available. And then, like you mentioned, yes, I imagine there'll be restrictions on you can't hold more than X number of official visits in June overall, and no more than some other number on a given weekend. So I would imagine this will try to be tempered, or at least put some guardrails on it. I know the NCAA loves using that term, but nonetheless, a good thing that they're going to try to do this. Like at some point, you want to have a normal recruiting process, and if the oversight committee, or sorry, the Division I council is recommending this, I mean, they think now, all right, there's enough where it can be safely done by that point. I think there's obviously they feel enough signs of that it's worth giving a shot. But no, I don't think June will be this thing where you have all these guys who are committed to other schools start rolling off. All right, I'm doing these 4 official visits in a month. I would imagine the bulk of those still happen in the fall. But that's just kind
I
of my
disagree.
guess.
I think these kids, I mean, they've been sitting around for a year, and the best thing they could do is take a self-guided tour. I mean, we see Nicholas Singleton already set 5 official visits. I think these kids are going to try to get all their visits in. I mean, the one reason they might not be able to is if the schools, there is like we can't have that many visits, and we just can't have you on right now. But otherwise, I think all these kids are going to try to take all of their visits in June because there's been a big trend ever since the NCAA, it was a couple years ago, went from only fall and winter visits to now you can come in the spring of your junior season officially from April to June. There's been a big shift in recruits wanting to take those spring visits. officially, and then wrap it up before their senior season so they could focus on that. So I think recruits still really are in that mindset of let me take my June official visits and then get it done.
Yeah, and last thing on this, I don't know that it'll be this mass thing just because I feel like they'll end up saying the total number and maximum on campus is going to be lower than you might think. I don't know. What's your guess for total number of officials they'll allow in June in total on a given weekend? I have an idea. I mean, but it's complete guesswork. What do
I'd
you
say
think?
maybe 5 to 10, 10, maybe about 10.
I would have said 5 in a weekend and a maximum of 20 for the month. That thing, this is just my complete
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, me too. I have no idea, but
I
I
think
just
that
have
kind of
talked to
caps
I've
what
talked
you
to plenty of
can
people
bring
that
in.
do feel like that those visits are going to be able to happen. Another
And that's a
Brandon
good cue.
Plesner.
And that's a good cue to move on to our question segment here. Of course, drop us a question in the comments. And if you want to make sure we answer it, we'll easily drop us a super chat and we will get to your question. Let's start off with Brandon's question here. As a subscriber, is there a way to see our future cast history and accuracy? If not, there should be. Pass it on to the man upstairs.
Brandon,
Mike, this feels like
honestly
something
have
you know.
I have no idea. No idea. No idea, dude. Sorry. Shoot me a DM or an email. We'll figure it out though. Um, yeah, let's get into some questions. Since Brandon, I gave you a lame answer there. Um, we'll get into this question: why so many pot of gold defensive offers than over offensive? Is the offensive recruiting staff slacking? So here's my thoughts here, Brandon. Um, majority of those defensive offers are in the defensive backfield. In covering Notre Dame, they offer so many DBs. Like the DB board in 2022 is massive. There's so many guys. It's just that's the position where Notre Dame casts a super wide net. Notre Dame doesn't cast a super wide net at quarterback, comparatively speaking. Running back, receiver is not that. Tight ends, certainly they've only offered, man, I think 5, maybe 4 guys in the entire class. Offensive line, they don't offer a ton. Defensive line, a good bit. So just the defensive side of the ball offers more. But if it just naturally, there's less offensive offers. Quarterbacks, Notre Dame's not going to offer a ton of guys. Running back, they're going to offer 10, 15 guys maximum. Receiver board's sizable. Tight end board, it's Notre Dame. They don't need to offer that many guys. Offensive line, same thing. It's Notre Dame. They don't need to offer that many guys. On the defensive side of the ball, they have to bust their tails in the secondary because Notre Dame just doesn't get a lot of those elite defensive backs. So they're going in super early on some of these DBs. So I just don't get the offensive recruiting slacking thing. 2020 and 2021 classes for Notre Dame. Let's look at those quarterbacks, 2 Under Armour All-Americans. Running back. You signed Audric Estime and Logan Diggs. Last cycle and Chris Tyree in 2020. Looking at receiver, I know that's a big one. Jordan Johnson, a 5-star. We're not going to get into the whole should he be playing thing because that's been beaten to a bloody horse at this point. Lorenzo Styles, Deion Colsey. I just don't get the offensive recruiting slacking thing, or the coaching staff doesn't know what they're doing stuff. Two out of the last 3 years they made the college football playoff. So no, they're not winning the national championship right now, but still pretty good results. Brian Kelly was named the number 3 head coach in all of college football right now. Number 3 behind Dabo and Nick Saban. That's pretty darn good.
Rick Mahalik asks, would Notre Dame accept the commitment of offensive tackle George Fitzpatrick right now?
That's a great question. Notre Dame has offensive line pledges from Ty Chan, tackle, Joey Tenona, interior player, as you know, Rick. Billy Schrouth is another interior guy who I feel that Notre Dame is a really good chance to land. So then they're going to take another tackle in the class. George Fitzpatrick is in the mix. Emil Wagner, Joe Brunner. Rick, I know you think Joe Brunner is an interior player. I'm told Notre Dame likes him at tackle, but certainly could, they could see him sliding inside as well if he's not ready for the tackle spot. Jake Taylor from Las Vegas, certainly in the mix. So George Fitzpatrick is a guy Notre Dame offered several months ago, still contacting with Jeff Quinn a good bit. So would they accept the commitment right now? If George Fitzpatrick called, my guess would be yes, but I don't have, you'd have to ask the coaching staff for that exact answer right now because I'm not 1,000% sure, but I do know that he's in good contact with the staff.
And George Fitzpatrick, for those of you guys listening to the podcast, 4-star offensive tackle out of the Denver area. All right, moving on. Richard Stevens asks, whatever happened to the linebacker from California who decommitted from USC that was supposed to be all Irish? And of course, Richard referring to Junior Tui Halamaka. Mike, where does Notre Dame stand with him?
Futurecast pick is in for Notre Dame. No reason to change it. This is the nation's number one inside linebacker, Junior Tui Halamaka, excuse me. Notre Dame, Stanford, Texas, maybe a little bit of Oregon, Arizona State is in this top group, but I think it's Notre Dame, Oregon, or Notre Dame, Stanford, or Texas. Those seem to be the three schools in the lead. But from everything I'm told, conversations with Brian Polian and Marcus Freeman, those are the two guys leading this recruitment, have been very good. Notre Dame's in that top group. And Bishop Alemany, who I thought that's where Clausen went to school, but it's his brother who coaches there. So Notre Dame ties there. Notre Dame's always recruiting at Bishop Alemany when those recruiting periods are open. I think Notre Dame gets this commitment. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, April or May. I think he's going to wait until June, take that official visit. Maybe he goes to Stanford, Texas, and maybe a couple others. But I think that this one is Notre Dame's to lose. That's that one.
Michael LeMay, hope I pronounced that right, Michael, asks, which position would coaches prioritize with limited visits?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm going to answer it like this. You look at Notre Dame's commitment list. Who do you feel the best about? Like, you are 100% sure, like, that kid is coming here. You look at like a Steve Angeli. I wouldn't use an official visit on my quarterback commit. Maybe, you tell him, hey, can you come in unofficially? I wouldn't. If we have, if you're a college and you have 20 official visits to work with, why would you, maybe you would use it on like a Steve Angeli so he could come in and recruit, but like a Jack Nickel, like one of these kids who's been to campus before, like a Nolan Ziegler. Like Ziegler could just drive in unofficially or something like that. So I would say you don't use it on a commit. Like if you only have 20, use it on those uncommitted guys that you really want to get in, with the exception of maybe Angeli, because he's been such a good recruiter already for Notre Dame. So I wouldn't again, like use it on some guys who you might not need to. But running back certainly is one. We already mentioned that they have tentative official visits for that. Receiver, bring up an Amorion Walker who's committed to Notre Dame from Louisiana. Bring up even Tyson Ford, defensive end. Honestly, I wouldn't even look at it as a position. I would look at it as the key targets. Like, who are your guys at the top of the board? And we need to bring those guys in. If Jalen Sneed is still uncommitted, you certainly want to bring him in. Junior Tui Halamaka, some offensive linemen. Zach Rice. Can Notre Dame get 5-star offensive tackle on campus? In the defensive backfield, there's some big-time players Notre Dame's involved with. Jaden Mangum, safety. Jake Pope, safety. KJ Winston, safety. Look at the cornerbacks: Kamari Rogers, Jair Brown, two big-time four-star players. Brown's committed to Ohio State. Rogers, top 100 player from Mississippi. Those are some guys that I feel that Notre Dame would want to get on campus. Go get those top guys. And again, I wouldn't have some of the commits on campus unless it is like a Tyson Ford, like guys who have never stepped foot on campus before, and you really want them to get there. Um,
Yeah, I look at it the same way. After you go and identify the very few, it's all right, that kid's coming and he's already been to campus, or he just wants to come no matter what, and we can bring him on, unofficially or in fall or whatever. Just go to the top of the board, look at, all right, these are the guys you most want to get, and then bring them on there because an official visit helps your chances. And that's really it. I don't think it's position either.
yeah,
Richard Stevens asks, how's defensive tackle looking this year?
yeah,
Assuming defensive tackle recruiting here.
yeah. We'll tackle from a recruiting perspective. No commitments yet. Biggest names on the board right now: Anthony Lucas, a four-star player from Arizona, someone who the Notre Dame staff absolutely loves, from what I'm told. Donovan Heinisch, actually spoke to him earlier today. He's in good contact with Mike Elston and Marcus Freeman. Donovan Heinisch, the younger brother of Kurt Heinisch, who used an extra year of eligibility to play a fifth season at Notre Dame. Caleb Artis, a young man from New York, a four-star player, has Notre Dame in his top group, and I feel like the Irish are leading that recruitment. Unless I'm forgetting someone, those are the three biggest names right now. Artis, Heinisch, and Anthony Lucas. Lucas is the top of the board guy, at least in my opinion. Like, he is someone who, I feel like the staff would take no matter what the recruiting board looks like. You definitely are bringing Anthony Lucas in. Heinisch, I feel that Notre Dame's going to get him. He's going to end up in Notre Dame's class. I know that Notre Dame fans might not be fired up about that, because he's ranked as a 3-star and, he doesn't have the sexy offer list, but Notre Dame loves Kurt Heinisch and what Kurt has brought to that program. And, I hear that Donovan Heinisch is a more advanced defensive lineman at his age than Kurt was. Different. I think Donovan might be a little bit smaller, but is more technically advanced, or I might be reversed. But I've heard really good things about where Donovan Heinisch is at this point, again, in his high school football career. So I wouldn't sleep on him. And then Caleb Artis is a freak. So this is another one of these spots where it's like, maybe two interior defensive linemen in this class. Maybe it's just one. It's a good problem to have, though, regardless.
Brandon Plenzer says, get Andre Green Jr., CJ Williams, and Xavier Bradshaw's butts on campus for official visits. Yeah, those are 3 receiver targets you consider, especially CJ Williams.
Yeah, those are 3 big receiver targets for Notre Dame. Andre Green Jr., 4-star player from Virginia. CJ Williams, a borderline 5-star guy. I think will get his 5th star. Notre Dame has had really good contact with him. Xavier Bradshaw has a story up on him, a slot receiver from Virginia. One guy I know Notre Dame fans know very well about because he was the Irish's 2nd overall offer in this 2022 class, Tyler Morris. I feel like Notre Dame fans might be forgetting about him a little bit, maybe writing off that he doesn't end up at Notre Dame. Keep an eye on Tyler Morris still. And don't forget about that name. But Patrick, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so I think we can get out of here, man.
I think that's a good wrap here. We'll be back on next week talking about my observations of seeing Sebastian Cheeks. I'm sure we'll touch on. Mike, you're out on the road seemingly all the time now. No shortage of stuff here to discuss, as busy time in Notre Dame recruiting as far as all these possible commitments and as we get closer to these visits. So appreciate you guys listening, watching, whether it's live or if you're watching this back. Thanks again. Again, leave us a review if you're listening on the podcast channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, hit that thumbs up button. If you're watching on YouTube, you do all those things. We'll love you forever. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Patrick Engel _, and you can follow Mike at Rivals _Singer. We'll talk to you again next week. Till then, take care.